Welcome to this edition of Health Talk. My name is Julianne Raftery, and today I'm joined by Dr. Fred Sylvester, who's going to be covering the caffeine intake and health benefits on the brain.
Yeah, so very interesting studies that have kind of been on the horizon probably over the last, I'll say, at least 6 months, that has become more popular in what coffee and caffeine can do from a protective mechanism to your brain. Actually, coffee has been being studied since 1958 in its effects, and so we have almost 75 years of research onto coffee and its benefits.
So tell us a little bit more about how caffeine can benefit the brain.
So there was a most recent study that came out. It was done with 6 European countries, and in those 6 European countries, 180,000 people were followed.
Wow.
In that 180,000 people, what they were really looking for is they were looking at how does the coffee intake and caffeine intake affect the brain. And so what they did is they had expert neurologists on to identify Parkinson's disease. And they also brought hematologists on board to actually be able to give a baseline concentration of the caffeine metabolites that sit through our blood plasma. And any deviation from a higher or lower, depending on how much you consumed or how much you didn't consume, was then being able to be tabulated and calculated.
Wow, it's fascinating. So can you tell me, for our coffee lovers out there, how many cups a day do you recommend for the average person?
Yeah, so there's some upper limits to this. The ceiling is very interesting. So anytime you go above 500 milligrams of caffeine per day, the benefits, the health benefits that exist in coffee then become thwarted. So you actually start to go the other way, where you reverse some of the effects that you think that would be much more beneficial. So in this case, more is not better.
Okay, so how many cups are we looking at?
Anywhere between 3 and 4 cups a day.
Okay.
And it also depends where you're going, because different coffees have different concentrations of caffeine. There's some local coffees and breweries that have 200 milligrams per cup. So it's up to you to make sure that you're doing your own investigation. If you're a Starbucks person or a Dunkin' Donuts person, each of those products have different levels of caffeine that's being involved in it. And plus decaffeinated also sits in that as well, that you have to be able to be mindful of as well.
Is there a certain time of day that you would recommend for coffee and caffeine intake?
Yeah, caffeine has a half-life of about 5 hours. So if you're consuming coffee at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to have half that concentration by 5 o'clock, and then from 5 to 10 you're going to have half that concentration as well. So typically the advice is that you shouldn't be drinking much caffeine if you want a restful night's sleep after the hours of 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to share?
So the study that we were talking about in Europe at this time, what they concluded is that if you keep your upper limits to 500 milligrams of black coffee a day, the chances that you can reduce Parkinson's disease reduces by 40%.
Wow.
And this is one of the most, we'll say, telltale studies that shows that caffeine, specifically coffee, black coffee, without any sugars or anything else like that, has a significant neuro-brain protective mechanism.
Wow. That's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you have anything else?
No, take-home message right now is basically this. Caffeine, we once thought was, a situation where it could be harmful, and it still can be if it's done in excess. But the most important component here is to make sure that we know what our upper limits are, what the caffeine that you're consuming, what effects it has on the brain, and more is not always necessarily better.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is before 3 p.m., so we're allowed to have our glass. Cheers. Good health and good day.